Welcome to episode 4 of this beginner Blender tutorial. In the last episode, we made the inner planets and set up an image texture for the Earth material. In this episode, we make the outer planets and begin to manipulate the meshes of some of our objects. Let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to first start off just by selecting Mars and hit the period key on your number pad to zoom over to it, and then just zoom back a little bit, and we're going to shift D to duplicate it, and then we're going to move it over. Since we're starting to get a little farther away and it's becoming more difficult to see, I'm going to switch it over to the just the object mode, the solid shade mode, instead of the rendered mode. We can always switch back if we want to check something out. So Jupiter should be pretty far out, and Jupiter needs to be pretty big compared to the other ones, so let's size that up. We don't want it too big compared to the sun. I think that's probably a good comparison there. We can definitely see Jupiter in relation to these other ones. It's much bigger, but the sun still dominates our animation. So let's go in here, and we just want to do the same things that we've been doing before as far as making a new instance of the material and renaming it. So this is Jupiter, and we want to rename the copy of Mars to Jupiter. Great. And now we want to just change the color. Let's make Jupiter a little bit more like a peach kind of color. And for this, we will actually switch back to the rendered mode so we can see what we got. That works. I can live with that. Maybe let's bring this brightness up just a little bit. There we go. That's a good Jupiter color from far. That works for me. All right, let's save real quick, because you should do that compulsively. And then we're going to go ahead and start working on Saturn. So Shift D to duplicate again, and we'll move him over. Oops. So I think we'll move Saturn to about here. That looks good. Hit period to zoom in. Now we'll switch back over just so it's easier to see. Size him down a little bit and compare these just a little bit smaller than Jupiter. That's good. Let's make a new material for Saturn, and then rename Saturn. Great. All right, so Saturn needs some rings. Let's do this. Change Saturn's color to sort of a tan color. That works for me. And now what we want to do is we want to make Saturn's rings. So go up and save file again. And so what we want to do is hit Shift S on the keyboard. That brings up this pie menu here. And so what we're going to do is go cursor to selected. That's going to snap this little 3D cursor, this little striped circle with the crosshairs there, to the center of this object, to the pivot point on this object. And so basically anything that we bring in from this point forward is now going to be aligned with the center of this object. So we're going to go Add, Mesh, go down to Torus. That's basically like a donut. Some of you may have done a donut tutorial, which if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's sort of a rite of passage. And now we're going to select it and hit S on the keyboard to scale it up. All right, so that's pretty good. Scale it down just a little bit. I like the sizing on it. That's just fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the, click on this. This is your size gizmo. And it's going to let us scale it down. And we just want to sort of squish it into a nice flat ring. Look at that. All right, let's actually size it down just a little bit more. So with this tool here, we can actually scale things non-uniformly, whereas if you just hit S, it scales it uniformly. So now we have Saturn's ring. Well, that needs a material, but we might as well just make it the same as Saturn. So we'll just set the Saturn material to that, and we'll go into the shading. And so there's our Saturn. And so you can see it's tough to see. It's so far away that it doesn't get a lot of light, and it's got Jupiter in the way, so that's why I'm working in this solid shaded look. Why don't we go ahead and tilt the ring just a little bit, just because usually when I see pictures of it, it's like the ring is sort of like this. It's sort of like skewed, and so I don't know if that's actually the way it is in its orbit, or if it's going to be aligned with the same plane that it's orbiting. But this is not supposed to be a realistic simulation. This is an artistic interpretation of our solar system. So I think this will work just fine for our purposes. We're going to rename that Saturn ring. And then we want to parent that to the Saturn planet, so that if we move the planet, the ring moves with it, because then we only have to animate the planet. All right, so we've got the ring selected, and we're going to then shift select the planet and hit Control P on your keyboard. You're going to select Object, and so what that does is, there we go. Now the ring is parented to the planet, and if we just select Saturn and hit G on the keyboard, we can grab it and move it around, and the ring moves with it. So next we need to make Uranus. And so Uranus also has a ring, so we're going to go ahead and select Saturn and select Saturn's ring, and we're going to hit Shift D to duplicate, and then let's go into the top view, slide Uranus out here. Oops. You can always hit Control Z to undo anything, and then Control Shift Z will redo it if you accidentally undo something too much. So I think that's going to be a good distance there. Alright, so Uranus has a small ring, and is a much smaller planet, so let's shrink it down. Should be decent size, smaller, that's fine. But we want it to be bigger than the inner planets, so let's make it a little bit bigger. I think that will work just fine. Now we want to shrink the ring here. So select the ring, hit period on the number pad to zoom to it, and now we're going to make this ring much smaller. In order to do that, we're going to have to go into edit mode and actually edit the mesh. So up here in the corner, select object mode. From the drop down, you're going to choose edit mode, and that then shows us the actual vertices and all of the edges and faces that make up our mesh. Another way to get in and out of edit mode is to use the tab key, and so you can just cycle back and forth between object mode and edit mode that way. That's very convenient. So zoom in on our mesh, and what we want to do is we want to go up here into the corner, and you're going to choose the edge select. Right now it's selecting on vertices and or a vertex, and we want it to be on edge mode. So select one of the inner edge pieces and go up to select loops, edge loops. So we've got the inner edge here selected. Go up to the proportional editing tool, that's this guy up here at the top. Click the drop down, go connected only, and then you're going to click the button next to it so it turns blue, so it turns on. And then we're going to hit S to size, and now when we size, you can see that it's not just what we have selected that's being manipulated. So now you can see that we have anything nearby that's connected to it is also getting some of that manipulation that we're doing. So by using your scroll wheel on your mouse, you can set how much influence that has, and so we want to set it to right about like that. Okay, now as you can see, it has made the ring a little bit different. The hole in the middle is bigger, and it is now not quite as thick. So if we tab to go back to object mode and hit S to scale the whole thing, now we can scale this ring down and have a much smaller ring. So now we need to go in and rename everything the way we were doing before. So we can hit that. Alright, so we want to just rename this, and then we're actually going to just set this to the same one, That's good. And then we need to rename this here. And expand that and change the name of the ring. Oh, this should be this ring. Okay, that's good. And so we want to change the color on this to be like a bluish kind of color. It might be a little dark. That's actually pretty good. So let's make the ring a different color. So let's give it its own material. And let's make that. All right, so here's a little tip. If there's any time that you want to reset one of these color wheel things just to be default white, you just take down the brightness all the way, move away so that the tool goes away, and then you click on it again, and then just scroll the brightness back up, and it'll be back at the default color value. So that's going to work for me. I'm fine with that. That looks pretty cool, in my opinion. So now we need to make Neptune and Pluto. And we're just going to continue the same basic idea. All right, I guess that's fine. Okay, so we should be good to go. I'm just going to collapse these things, see if there's anybody I need to rename. No, looking good. Zoom out here. Oh, here's something. So we zoomed out to the point where we can't see anything. So you can fix that by going over to View, and then you want to find the clipping here. So clip start, clip end, and we're going to change the clip end. We're just going to bump that up to 2000. And we might as well go ahead and do that on the camera as well, because we're going to need to have that done for later. So select the camera in the scene collections. Go down to the camera options, and we're going to need to set the clipping end to 2000. That'll do it for episode 4. In episode 5, we will set the planets in their orbits and let the computer animate them.